fun. I really like it a lot. It just brings together so many different fields. I'm going to be talking mostly from an astronomy point of view, but it really brings in biology, sociology, all kinds of different disciplines can be brought into this subject in different ways. So it's a lot of fun. Now, I'm going to try to keep this on the short side, I hope. I know that most of us are sort of zoomed out, and watching things on Zoom are hard enough as it is. Probably people checking their phones already. But I just want to try to give some overviews and save time for questions. This can go, there's a lot of rabbit holes here that one can go into when talking about aliens and UFOs and abductions and crop circles and whatnot. So I'll try to make sure I leave space for questions of different kind. This is a kind of cute picture I have here. This is obviously not a UFO. This is a lenticular cloud, which are often mistaken for UFOs. I like this because it almost looks like it has a jet coming out the end, which is kind of fun. So this is really the scientific look or thinking about what goes into this question. And really, the fundamental question, before you even go into that, is life in the universe common? Is extraterrestrial intelligent life out there? And there are lots of ways to think about this, but I think it's naive not to think about this large-scale picture. And this is a picture from the Hubble Space Telescope. And effectively, they did a deep sky, a long integration towards a blank piece of sky. So they actually picked a place where they thought nothing was at and just kept taking data for weeks. And in this image, I'm not sure you can see my mouse now, there's only 3 stars. Those are the objects that have little crosses on them. But everything else in this image is a galaxy, like our Milky Way. These are large structures full of stars, stars, solar systems, black holes, neutron stars. Everything that we think of, all the stars you see in the sky are in our galaxy. And these are all the galaxies in this little patch of sky. And if we look at that, we can gotta estimate. Since the Big Bang, 13.8 billion years ago, we can see a certain distance because light is finite in its travel time. Light takes a certain amount of time to reach us. And so we can only see the observable universe. It might be infinite, it may not be, we don't know. But if we look at our observable universe, what we can see, we see something like 2 trillion galaxies, which is a huge number. It doesn't fit in your head. And then each of those galaxies has something like 100 billion stars in each galaxy, which is another mind-boggling number. Each of those stars has many planets. We did not know this. 20 years ago, we did not know that planets are common. Planets are the natural outcome of the star formation process. So planets are made. Our solar system is not special in this regard. It's pretty common. So all those stars have some planets, many planets, probably more than our 8 maybe, or less than our 8, we don't know. But all stars seem to have planets, which naturally is the question is, how many of these have aliens? Now, this is not guaranteed they're out there, but I would argue the worst case scenario is that there's 1 intelligent life per galaxy. That means there's 2 trillion aliens.
Looks like you might have been
Mike, you got on mute, Leslie.
Am I back?
Yes, you are. Sorry about that.
Someone muted me. Where was I at?
A billion stars.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, there's like 100 billion stars, actually 200 billion stars in our galaxy or so. Let's just say 1% of all those stars have life of some kind around them on a planet. And if only 1% of those have intelligent life, so 100 billion stars, 1% of those, that's still like 10 million advanced civilizations out there. If you said, what about 0.1% of all the stars in our galaxy alone have life, and only 0.1% of all those have intelligent life. That's still over 100,000 advanced life forms out there. That's huge numbers. If you tell someone that there's 100 billion stars in our galaxy, they will believe you. But you tell someone a bench has wet paint, and more often than not, they will have to touch it. The point here is that these numbers I've been telling you are so big, they don't fit in your head. They don't really fit in my head. The scale of what I'm talking about is massive and huge and difficult to really place into context. So all I'm really saying is that just based on numbers alone, which is not a proof, which is not a guarantee, it does seem very naive to think that we are the only life forms in our galaxy or in the universe at all. So there is a lot to be said for the scientific thought of just what's the likelihood out there. So it's crazy to think that intelligent life only exists on Earth because these pure numbers, the statistics alone seem mind-boggling. Now, many people will come back with the point, yes, there's lots of planets out there, but Earth is special. Earth is a very special place. Now, if you dig a hole in the ground and you pour water in it, that water forms a very unique and a very special shape, but only because you poured water into a specific hole. And the Earth is kind of like that. Life formed on our planet in a certain way to match the Earth. So it seems nicely tuned to our Earth, but mostly because it was formed on our Earth, and so it sort of had to do so. If we ask the question, is Earth special? I think the astronomical answer is going to be, we don't think so. As I said, in the last decade, we've been detecting planets around other stars as fast as we can. I mean, there are 4,000 now known planets around other stars. We detect them almost anywhere. They seem to be very common on all stars, and they seem to have the same elements that we have here. Life uses hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and carbon, and that's the four most common elements in the universe. If life used some special rare earth, you might think life is rare, but in reality, life uses common elements, and those are common, and they're seen around other planets. As soon as life could happen on Earth, as soon as life could happen, it did. Early Earth, as it formed in the sun, as the sun formed around in this disk of material, kind of what I study, the early Earth was very hot. It had no water. It had very little atmosphere. It had no oxygen. So life could not even happen on the surface. And to top it all off, during this period, we call the heavy bombardment, very early on after the Earth formed, giant rocks were raining down constantly. One of those big rocks was the size of Mars and formed our moon. So these giant rocks were falling. So if life tried to start, it would get hit on the head by a big rock. That's not good for life. But as soon as that stopped, soon as big rocks stopped forming from the sky, as soon as we had an ocean, life formed very quickly, astronomically speaking. So something like a few million to 100 million years, life happened fast. That seems to take the likelihood of chance out of it. Some process probably drove it. And even life, intelligent life, evolution takes a while to work on early life and to bring up not only multicellular animals. Remember, the early Earth had no oxygen. We couldn't survive on the first 2 billion years of Earth because there's no oxygen. Life made that oxygen doing photosynthesis, and actually caused the first mass pollution of the Earth was oxygen. And once that happened, life can move to the surface, and life could have more complicated type life like ourselves. But the goal of evolution is never intelligence. That's not the point. Ask any dinosaur or trees. Intelligence is a certain niche that sometimes gets filled. It may not always get filled, but sometimes it does, and it happens here on this planet. Now, after saying all that Earth is not really special, we don't see any process that makes Earth special, there might be one thing that makes Earth special. We got a big moon. We have a really big moon compared to our size. And moons are cool because, like I said, remember the early Earth, life formed in the water because the surface was not habitable. we think that early life needed tides to move mature water back and forth, and the moon helps with large tides. The moon provides stability. Our axis of tilt is more stable because of the moon. The moon, we think, protects us against asteroids. It helps clear out the orbit around the Earth, as you can tell by all the craters on the moon. Some of them are from the heavy bombardment. Some of them are more recently. Of course, there's some downsides to the moon. There's werewolves. But otherwise than that, it's a great thing. And what's really weird, if you look at all the terrestrial planets, Mercury, Venus, have no moons at all, 0 moons. Venus is exactly like the Earth, just a little closer, has no moon. Mars, the other terrestrial planet, has a little dinky moon, that potato-like moon that maybe it's a captured asteroid, maybe not. Now, some people think the moon is critical for life on Earth. We don't really know, and we don't know if big moons are common in other solar systems yet. Detecting a planet is hard enough. Detecting a planet that has a moon and detecting the moon separately is a lot of work. So we don't know about that one. But life formed quickly on this planet. We think that's encouraging. We think that the numbers are on our side. So we think that extraterrestrial intelligent life is possible in the solar in our galaxy. And that's not science fiction. That's not pseudoscience. That is the result of scientific thinking. It is possible. It's not guaranteed, but it's possible. Now just think, our universe is 13.8 billion years ago, and our sun is at least a 3rd generation star because we have metals on our planet. So that means that the 1st generation of stars couldn't have life. The 2nd and 3rd maybe could. And it took us something like 4.6 billion years for life to happen and evolve to intelligence, or arguably intelligence, on this planet. And one of the fundamental questions we have to always think about, are we fast or were we slow? Is life actually very fast on our planet, or were we very slow? Because that kind of informs this whole idea about alien life, about the possibility of UFOs. Just think of what we could do, or other intelligent life could do, in 1 million years of time. We could say, solve pandemics quickly. We could solve racism quickly. Who knows? All kinds of possibilities out there. And what civilization can do in just 1 million years compared to now. Look how much life has changed just in the last 10 years with technology. Some people may say, hey, we've looked for intelligent life. We've looked for aliens and we haven't seen them. So where are they? What's going on? And the scientific answer here is we actually have not really looked. We've not looked hard at all. It turns out the sky is really big and there's lots of stars. We use radio telescopes indeed to look for signs of aliens, search for extraterrestrial intelligence, SETI project. But most of the time we don't. Radio telescopes like this one here in Green Bank, West Virginia, are expensive. They are hard to run, and it is a lot of a commitment to a project to look for aliens when the chances of success is very, very, very small. Whereas astronomers like myself also need to do other things, try to understand how stars form, things like that. But even if you do get a little bit of time on a telescope to look for extraterrestrial intelligence, you have to look at the right planet, at the right time, using the right frequency. There could be, you could be working on 100 FM or 105 FM, or they could be transmitting at low frequencies or high frequencies. We don't know. They could be using different polarization. You need to look at both polarizations at once. There's different polarizations of light. You have to have the right channel size. Are you working on, FM radio channel sizes are made up by humans based on our time scales, what we think's right. It's not a universal truth. If you have a big channel and the aliens are sending a small channel width, you can miss the signal completely, or opposite too. And once all that happens, you still have to get a message that's somehow encoded in an alien way and understand it. And if you get any of those wrong time scales, whatever, you missed it. I mean, even humans, we are not seriously sending out signals to aliens right now. It's a question of money. It's a question of interest. It's a question of time. But we've sent, our only serious signal that we sent out was only about 3 minutes at Arecibo. And that was mostly a publicity stunt. There have been some signals sent out, but they haven't been very serious. There was actually a Doritos commercial where they sent a signal to some stars for aliens. Now, I'm sure that turn is going to be very interesting if the aliens are listening. Now, all that said, we do have one project right now called Breakthrough Listen, which is a complete revolutionary idea funded by a Russian oligarch, about $100 million. They actually bought 25% of the time on this telescope and 25% of time in a telescope in Australia, Parkes. And they are doing the first systematic search for signals that's ever really been done. And it's been ongoing for a few years yet. And so far, we've not heard anything. Now, you could argue, what about visitations? Is that even likely or possible? I will say that traveling to the stars, interstellar travel between stars, is very, very hard. It may be impossible, no matter what Star Trek and Star Wars or whatever TV show you're watching says. Traveling these distances is mind-boggling. On size scales, it's hard to believe. If our sun were the size of a softball, our Earth is the size of a pinhead, about 35 feet away. And our Earth distance we've ever traveled, the farthest humans have ever traveled, is to the moon, which is only about an inch away. So we've not traveled much. The nearest star on that scale, if the sun is the size of a softball, the next sun, Proxima Centauri, our closest star, the closest one to us, which we know has planets now, is in California. And we've traveled an inch. The scale is mind-boggling, and there's no place to stop for gas on the way. So you have to bring all the fuel with you. Our fastest spacecraft ever made so far is the Voyager spacecraft, which still take 100,000 years to reach our nearest star. But if in the next few hundred years we can go faster, if we can get up to something like 10% the speed of light, what could we do? So this is a thought experiment. If we have a civilization and they send, and let's say 100 years we can do this, we send a spacecraft in one direction to a planet we know exists because we've been looking at it, and then every 500 years, 2 more get sent out from each colonized planet. You can actually colonize the entire galaxy a lot faster than you would think. In other words, if you did this sort of every 500 years, send out a new spacecraft, you could colonize the entire galaxy in a few million years, maybe in the worst case pessimistic view, 100 million years. But remember, it took us 4.6 billion years to evolve on this planet. And so 100 million years is nothing in comparison. So a little bit of advantage in evolution or timescales of evolving on a planet makes a huge difference. So what I'm saying is that my arguments here are that aliens could colonize an entire galaxy very quickly. And it may be before another advanced civilization even comes around. That's why life on our planet is based on one type of life. Life happened, and then quickly evolved, became very good at life. Any other life evolving or trying to evolve would get squashed. It just no longer was competitive. That's kind of the same thing. As soon as life happens in the galaxy and can travel between the stars, it can, and then it should. And then scientifically, what I'm saying is that aliens coming to our solar system is a scientifically believable thing. A poll jumped up, hey? I can't move it. Okay, this leads us to one of the famous questions of really, I think of anyone who's thought about this carefully. And this was first put forward by Enrique Fermi at the University of Chicago. And effectively, he thought about these arguments I've made about how fast life happened, about the size of our galaxy, about how life evolves, things like this, how long we communicate, our worldview, things like this. And the argument is pretty strong that aliens should exist. I believe they do. And then he asked the question, well, if they exist and they had a little bit of a head start, maybe a few million years of a head start, they should be here now. So where are they? It's the Fermi Paradox. Now, many people said that maybe we live in a cold, empty universe, and there's some filter, some great filter that stops civilizations from becoming galactic travelers. Either it's something that's happened in our past, and we've made it past. We've actually made that hurdle over the filter. Maybe it's the beginning of life. Maybe it's the beginning of farming. Maybe it's the beginning of speech. or the internet or whatever. What is it that stops us, stops civilizations? Or, and this is the scary part, it's something in our future that we haven't reached yet. Now, there are other possibilities to answer this question. Why haven't we seen aliens yet? And the answer could be prime directive of Star Trek. We have to reach a certain level of technology before they share, or they're scared of their civilizations. Stephen Hawking actually said that we should not be communicating or trying to communicate because when advanced civilizations meet with lower civilizations, it doesn't usually work out well, ask the Native Americans. So there are some other ideas that could be thought of here, but it's all of which are interesting. Some people will argue we already have evidence. The UFOs, for example. What I find very interesting about UFOs is that UFOs became a thing really once we, as a civilization, had the idea that we can travel fast and that we may be able to travel in the future between the stars. Once we realized that idea, UFOs began to come into the social consciousness. And before that, it wasn't really thought of. In fact, most civilizations had no idea or thought of aliens in the past. And the earliest UFO recordings that we thought were actually from aliens were really around the late 1800s, early 1900s. And it's funny because the people who saw them thought they were blimps, because at that time, what's the highest technological advancement they had? Blimps. And so any alien would be having a blimp. It's kind of like when we first saw canals on Mars. That's the evidence of advanced civilization because they have canals, and because on Earth at that time we were making canals. And then once World War II happened, jet planes, this idea of fast travel, we moved into different types of UFOs. And in fact, the word UFO is sort of a modern thing. At first, in 1947, Kenneth Arnold, a pilot, saw what he considered flying saucers skipping on the water around Mount Rainier in Washington. And then the word flying saucer was everywhere, taking over the lingo. It became associated very quickly with aliens. And then today, the question we're asking here, 50% of all Americans think that UFOs are associated with extraterrestrial intelligence. And the word UFO is coined as an unidentified flying object to go against the confusion of flying saucer. And then today, the word UFO is just taking the same connotation as being an alien associated object, though usually it's not meant to be. This is a fun slide. I just stole it from some website, but it's sort of gone through and they look at all of the UFO sightings through the last 50 years or so. And what's fun here is to see the diversity. I already told you that if there is extraterrestrial life, it's probably the one main civilization is probably the ones who've dominated travel up to this point. And so you wouldn't expect to see such wide variation in aliens. Also, there's lots of places to go besides Earth. And so Earth is not going to be necessarily bringing in so many various types of UFOs. So why are UFOs then so hard to explain? UFOs are mostly pseudoscience, which is to mean they're mostly people pushing an agenda. They're not researched in a direct way because most of the sightings have to be explained after the fact and usually without any complete information. The sightings are based on eyewitness accounts, and eyewitness accounts can work in courts of law, but they don't work very well in science. We need to have repeatable experiments to show us something. And we know that eyewitness accounts are unreliable. There's a famous video done here at the U of I where there's people are told to watch a bouncing ball. And on that video, while it's happening, a man in a gorilla suit walks in and walks out of the frame. Very few people recognize the gorilla. There is just a lot of discrepancy. And then when you bring this to the side of pseudoscience, inconsistencies are often ignored. They only stick to their facts, which are usually, NASA won't say, it's a conspiracy. And the argument usually is a failure to find a normal explanation, therefore means it's aliens, whereas that's not true at all in science. Lack of a normal explanation is not evidence of alien visitation at all. So here's the two videos that have been recently released. I'll let these play. The left one here rotates, which is the fun thing about it. It's in the infrared. He's got a lot of airplay recently, and you see the rotation right there. That's kind of the fun part. And then that's called the gimbal cams. It's from a gimbal camera. And this is the other now, which is a fast-moving object, which they're trying to do with their scanner. The pilots argue, both the pilots in these cases all thought they were actually UFOs and thought they were for sure aliens. He was tracking it.
No, I took an auto card. Oh, okay. Oh my gosh, dude.
And there's lots more of these type of things. There's also a lot of hoaxes too. These are actually taken and verified by the U.S. government. So these I believe in. But let's think about this a little bit. When scientists see these types of UFOs and discussion points, we don't usually freak out. We're not saying, oh, they're wrong. But it's not a very strong evidence for aliens, right? Because the existence of aliens and UFOs would be extraordinary. Our first big mind shift of humans was that we're not the center of the solar system or the center of the Earth. We're not the center, Earth's not the center of the solar system. We're not the center of the galaxy. We're not the center of the universe. And now to realize that we're not alone would be a huge shift in our scientific thinking. So we need strong, strong evidence for that. We would love this type of stuff to be evidence of alien life, but it's just not. Although intriguing, like those videos are really intriguing. The first answer is it's unlikely to be a UFO, to be a UFO that's actually an alien-based UFO in vernacular. And the reason for that's really Occam's razor, right? Occam's razor is the idea that the simplest explanation is often the correct one. And the simplest explanation is some local phenomena of some kind. When you lose your keys, you don't say aliens took them. I mean, you might say it. It might be a valid hypothesis, but there's no chance it's the right answer. And we found out later that you were out really late at night, maybe had too much, and you lost your keys. You can blame it on aliens, but you can blame effectively any question on aliens. It has the same veracity. And so that's not a good solution. We have to go beyond that. And in fact, in this example, many people have already suggested on the gimbal, which is the one on the left side, it has a camera that rotates in order to keep the image still as the plane moves. And people have recreated that. And in fact, the rotation of the object looks like the rotation of the gimbal. So they think it's a lens flare, a bright object to the offset, which then when it rotates, looks like it moves. The one on the right with the very fast object has been shown in many other cases. When you see very fast, even when pilots think they're very fast, an object like a balloon, a very slow object that's very close, when object's moving, seems to move very quickly because of their point of view. And so that's the most likely explanation. Now, it could be something else, but the likelihood of it being aliens is very small, no matter what. Now, it's true, pilots have a better feeling for this than others, but most of the time, when we're talking about UFOs in today's society, most people don't look at the night sky. They don't go out and look like most of us are looking at our phones probably right now. So we don't know what Venus looks like when it's very low in the horizon. There's lots of turbulence. So we don't know what a ball of lightning looks like. And so a lot of these things turn into the idea of UFOs and then picked up by people who are trying to push this agenda. And often there's just hoaxes. We know that there's more hoaxes than there are actually real truth idea of thinking it's a real UFO or not. So there's a lot of problems with UFOs in general, as is crop circles, alien abductions, ancient aliens. All of those are really pseudoscience-y in the fact that they really don't look at details or they ignore details. The worst book ever written is Cherry of the Gods, which effectively lies on all cases. So my conclusions here. Yep, I think ET life exists. I would be surprised if ET life doesn't exist and is not somewhat common in our galaxy and in the universe overall. But I'm a scientist. I'm free to say we don't have any evidence yet. I just think that what we're finding every day changes how we think. We have not yet looked for life on Mars in any serious way. We've not looked for life on Europa, which is a moon of Jupiter, has an ocean bigger than the Earth's ocean. Life on Titan, a number of other moons. There's a lot of options for life out there. We haven't actually even scratched the surface yet. All of that said, it is plausible that aliens have visited the solar system or even the Earth at some point in our history. That is possible. It's a hypothesis, but there's no evidence to back it up. We need evidence to believe that. Until then, it's the most unlikely option. Now, this is not pseudoscience. Pseudoscience is trying to make an agenda and ignore facts and so forth. This is a rational scientific hypothesis, and it's based on facts. And we are looking. It's still early days to search, but the consciousness is out there. More scientists are aware of this. The idea is more ingrained now. It is not something that's laughed at. It is a serious scientific study. And the universe is big. All kinds of things to find out there. And we're only beginning to really look in any serious way. So I would say the search is really on now. And it's a matter of time before we find really the interesting aspects here and open our minds to the possibilities and think outside the box and think about how life happened on this planet. We only have an example of one so far, and that's very difficult to draw conclusions from. So thank you all for your time. I appreciate listening to me. I'll try to keep it short. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to take any questions you have.
Leslie, thank you very much. To say that was interesting is an understatement. I'm just trying to kind of absorb it, and I have a couple questions, but first, we have one from Mike Walbuser. Actually, you know what? Before we get into questions, I just wanted to take just a couple seconds and recognize Joe and Dee Molinari for this entire presentation, because frankly, without those two arranging for all this, reaching out to you, really putting this entire presentation together, it wouldn't have happened. So I just I wanted to thank the two of them, fantastic alumni and members of our club. And one other shout out is to the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. They're an absolutely wonderful partner of ours, and we're excited to do more presentations like this in the future. So on to the first question from Mike Walbuser. Could Earth be the result of colonization from another civilization?
Good question, actually. Could Earth be from another civilization? I think that's a little unlikely. That there's an idea called panspermia, which is the idea that life did not start on this planet; it started somewhere else and moved here. There's many reasons to think that because of timescales. What's really interesting, though, is that material moved between Mars and Earth quite frequently. An asteroid would come in, hit a piece of Mars, it would pop up, and then land on Earth. So we get meteorites from Mars and vice versa. Now, what's really interesting is that we know that early life can survive in space. And it turns out that life on Earth, some life on Earth, is very good at surviving in the vacuum and radiation of space. And that's kind of unexpected. You wouldn't have life on Earth doesn't need to do that. So there is some evidence that maybe life on Earth could have been transported here from maybe Mars. Now, from another solar system, I think that's much less likely and maybe impossible. From an advanced civilization starting life, the genetics and evolution may point against that, but I suppose there's some possibly it's a hypothesis. It's hard to prove. But even if all those cases are true, you still have to start life somewhere. And that's the part we're still trying to understand how that works. How do you start life somewhere?
Okay, we have one from Michael Peterson, excuse me if I mispronounced your last name. SETI has existed for decades. Has it produced any positive evidence?
Good question too. So SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, is an institute in Mountain View, California. I know the people work there quite well. So it was first started. So NASA originally had a plan to do a search for extraterrestrial intelligence back in the, I want to say early 80s, late 70s, maybe early 70s. And
Nope.
And what happened is that one Democratic senator killed it off because no green men had been detected yet. So they had this huge plan for doing a multi-phase study. It was shut down. So SETI was the outcome of that because then they needed private funding. The government was no longer allowed to fund SETI at all. And so because of that, SETI, the institute, was born, which is a privately funded institute. And they've been doing lots of good work. I don't disagree with that. But again, very little amount of telescope time because we don't like to give our telescope time away for free for SETI searches. And so they have found some results. There are a number of interesting results that have come out of SETI and other projects. For example, you might have heard of the WOW signal. The WOW signal happened at Ohio State Telescope called Big Ear, and they see a quick bright signal that happened, but it was never reproduced. What it was, we don't know. We have seen that happen frequently. There are signals. Now today, we know something called fast radio bursts, which is a new object around a certain type of star that give all these really bright radio waves. They could be from that. But there are a number that have not repeated themselves. They've also found a number of top secret satellites through SETI, but those aren't allowed to be discussed much. So they've done some work. There's been some signals that are questionable, interesting, but nothing has been found of any significance yet.
Thank you. Let's see. We have one from Gail. Flying saucers, what might they really be?
So flying saucers, UFOs come in lots. The ones that have been cited come in many different flavors. The majority of them are hoaxes. A number of them turn out to be fast aircraft that the user had never seen before. It's like if you have never seen in flight a B-1 bomber, for example, or the special sweep wing bombers, they can be looking surprising to you. Venus is the most common answer. Venus is a very bright object at the horizon. Because of turbulence, it will seem to jump around because stars kind of twinkle at a certain size. Jupiter doesn't twinkle above, but it does twinkle at the horizon and can actually look like it's changing colors and move around fast. Swamp gas has been one thing that's been modified before. Ball lightning, a number, even insects in a magnetic field over certain regions can look like a glowing group of UFOs. So there's been a number of them. Again, nothing has come out of that that's scientific. There's been a study of UFO reports back in the late 70s, and the answer was nothing scientific can be shown from these UFO sightings.
I'm going to jump in here. No one has mentioned Area 51. I mean,
yeah.
Is that legit? And do they actually, because when you said that we don't have any facts to base actual life on, I don't know. My assumption is you would actually need to have an alien and cut it open and say, yes, that's not from this planet for it to be a fact. How does Area 51 fit into all this?
So I'm not sure you need to cut it open. I mean, I think a UFO landing on the front lawn and shaking your hand would be good enough for me, as long as it looks like an alien. It doesn't look like a deformed human, I guess. So Area 51 is a well-known site. As you know, there's lots of issues about Area 51. What we do know from Area 51 is that in reality, most of these things that have happened are due to not spacecraft, but aircraft testing facilities. So we test aircraft at. It's a well-known location for testing aircraft. If any scientist knew about a real alien being kept at a facility, as much as you may be a conspiracy nut, that information would break out pretty fast, in my opinion, because, I mean, look at the hydrogen bomb lasted, a few months, a year maybe, before that secret was blown to the Soviets. So I think that Area 51 is more of a conspiracy aspect than anything else. It also grew out of the idea of the UFO crash in Roswell. And that UFO crash has been well known, documented now as a top secret study of high altitude parachutes, which they covered up as a weather balloon. And a lot of that comes from that too. And actually, the aliens found, they were doing, unfortunately, doing some studies of high altitude jumps with monkeys, some of which were killed. And so some of that came from that aspect.
Got it. All right, we have from Matt Wazolik. Based on current info and science, what would the Drake equation number be range-wise?
The Drake equation is this idea put forth by Frank Drake in West Virginia, not too far from where that telescope I showed was at. And it goes to like, what don't we know, and how do we estimate the chances for alien life? And it goes to the terms like how many stars are born, what fraction have planets, what fraction have life, and so on. And I teach this in my class. I go through the entire process, and the number is quite dramatically different depending upon how pessimistic you are for different terms. I'm right now comfortable of a Drake equation in 1,000. Unfortunately, that means the nearest civilization is still very far away from us. But again, even with that number, even if you say the Drake equation gives you 1,000-ish, one of them should have evolved faster than us. And then where are they? So back to we still have the Fermi Paradox, right? Which is we don't know why they're not here yet.
All right. From Joe Molinari, I think he's referencing in the presentation and them both Joe and Dee doing everything. Dee did it all. That's all he had to say. All right. From Joe Drago. Isn't there evidence from the ancients, such as hieroglyphs, that they have observed flying saucers?
So what people who want to believe in UFOs that are clear ideas of aliens is they say, well, there's no modern good pictures of aliens. So let's go back to something in the ancient world that we didn't understand. And what it turns out, of course, is that there are some hieroglyphs that specifically look like UFOs, most of which have been defaced or are actually faked. But even that said, there's no evidence that any of the hieroglyphs or the images or the building of the pyramids or any of that are linked back to aliens. Most of the cases, this comes really from this one book, Cherry of the Gods, which was arguably at best racist, i.e. that you can't have brown people make objects that look so good and are so huge and so monumental, therefore aliens must have helped them. Or they're just based on misinformation. I have not seen there's even examples in early Christian artwork from the 1500s or so. That's not early, mid-early. That show these little objects that look like UFOs floating behind Jesus. And the answer comes back to then. It's symbols. What the population, what most of which could not read or could not read the Bible, what they needed to have in their pictures to make explanations to it. Trying to be clouds, of course. These and the different aspects of this really comes down to how you currently modern people try to read into symbolism that wasn't meant for them.
Thank you. Okay, so from Aaron, what are your thoughts on economics as the barrier for civilization to be a space-faring one? Could that be the filter?
That could easily be the filter. Space travel is going to be expensive. It's going to be hard. And even sending out signals. Let's say you want to send out a signal to an advanced civilization because we're going to send out signals now. It costs a lot of money to send out a signal for 1,000 years or 100 years because it takes a long time for light to travel to the nearest star systems, and they have to be there when you're sending it. So you need to send it out for hundreds of years. That costs a lot of money. So there's no chance of us doing that right now. Luckily, right now, our best signal to aliens is actually from military radar that sometimes get flashed. That's the brightest thing being sent out. You can detect it nearby star systems with a decent size antenna. But they're not really, the economics is hard. So you have free energy or something, or a cheap way. But once you get a cheap way to make a space vehicle, someone's going to do it, right? Someone's going to head off to America, effectively, because of religious beliefs or because of feelings of whatever. You think that will happen, but that's probably still 1,000 years away. For economical reasons specifically.
All right, from Pete Flavick, we have SpaceX wants to put 12,000 satellites in orbit. How will this affect your work? Does there need to be, or is there some kind of regulation to control what gets put into orbit?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm getting the document now. They are horrible at this. Yeah, this is not good for astronomy. Modern astronomy, we're looking at all the sky now. We try to observe as much of the sky as possible. There's lots of cool things. We're detecting black holes eating single stars now because we're looking at so much sky. And I never believed that would happen. And these satellites just come right in and screw up our images. So we are not happy with Starlink. They're much brighter than they're supposed to be, and they're a little unpredictable because they're too low in the atmosphere. And so we can't even say when they're going to happen. So it's been a nightmare. We've actually been talking to our U.S. Senator about this because Illinois is big into surveys, and we have a lot of big projects that are going to be affected by Starlink.
Right, from D, it's either Dehabes or D. Ahabes. I recently read an article indicating that your sun may be quite magnetically compared to other stars. If true, highly active stars may be the filter that prevents intelligent life from progressing technically. It does not mean we have passed the great filter, or a mass coronal ejection could still end civilization here before we venture out into the void.
Yeah, so we do have our sun sometimes differently. We don't have enough timeline to see how unusual that really is yet. Some people have shown that it's actually not as drastic as some others think. But I agree that there are, instead of coronal mass ejections, which are dangerous, but mostly dangerous in the north in winter or the south in winter, the biggest issue is going to be asteroids. We're going to be hit by a big asteroid at some point. It may be today, it may be tomorrow, it may be in a million years. But a big asteroid is going to impact, and that's the bigger problem we have to prepare for longevity. So we're keeping all of our eggs in one basket quite literally, and that basket is the Earth. Until we move off the Earth, we have to be very careful about coronal mass ejection events, about stability of our orbit, about climate change, about pandemics, about all these things that have long-term. If we want to survive as a truly advanced civilization, we have to step up and really protect ourselves long-term. We can't be thinking about what's going to happen the next election cycle, and we need to think about that too, but there's also a larger picture, the astronomical picture. We have about 1 billion years left, which sounds like a long time, about 1 billion years left on this planet before the sun gets too bright. Sun's going to get brighter, have a huge, our oceans will boil away in about 1 billion years. So we have about that long to somehow figure that out and save ourselves from asteroids. So there are issues, and those could be the filter.
All right, from Dave, we have weak explanations of phenomenon are usually provided because nothing else can explain the phenomenon, and some experts feel they must classify incidents no matter what. I think that
I agree with that statement.
More of a comment. What is the percentage of observable universe that we have actually studied?
Oh, that's a hard question. Studied, a very small percentage, but that's changing. Illinois is part of a lot of projects. One of them is called the Large Survey of Space and Time Telescope, LSST, and we're going to be observing the night sky every 3 nights, the entire night sky every 3 nights. And so we're going to be seeing a lot of the sky, and it's about how deep you can go. So you miss most of the deep galaxies, the ones that are very far away, but we're getting a lot of the nearby stuff. So we're more and more, but we're still missing a lot. And there's a lot we don't understand in astrophysics and the origin of a lot of the details. Like with dark matter and dark energy, we know nothing about. So
awesome. Well, the last couple comments were comments thanking you, and therefore I will too. Professor Looney, this has been an outstanding presentation. Very cool stuff. Could not thank you more. And for everyone who's on here tonight, if you would please, we're going to post this on our Facebook page. If you don't know about it, Suburban Illini Club, just like it. And once you see this video up there, if you would share it, because frankly, everyone should hear what we heard tonight. So again, Leslie, thank you again. Appreciate it. And hope to have you out again soon.
Great. Thanks, everyone.